Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar about Cycles 4D. My name is Tran Phuc, and I'm a staff member of INSYDIUM. And today I want to show you how great Cycles 4D is to create motion design. Let's have an overview about what we are talking today. First one is a bridge to Cinema 4D. Then we are talking about Mograph. And in the end, we are going to talk about X particles. And as you can see in these little examples, this is all about motion design. So I hope this is going to be useful for you motion designers out there. And let's see what we are going to create. All right, so let's go into our bridge to Cinema 4D. So Cycles 4D is a render engine that was bridged to Cinema 4D by INSYDIUM, and it has three major features I want to show you. That is, first of all, the very unique material node system, where you can build amazing materials from. It starts very simple, but it can be very complex, and it's super smart, and I will show you that it's actually quite easy to use, and you can build on top of it later on. Then Cycles 4D comes with a CPU or GPU rendering solution, so you can put a lot of graphic cards in your system, and you can render with all of those cards at the same time. And you have, of course, team rendering support, so you can really speed up your renderings very fast. And the third thing is that Cycles is a very complete system. It can render all modules from Cinema 4D. It works well with Mograph. It has the best render solution for X particles you can find on the market. And you have TFD or volume support as well. So let's go into Cinema 4D now, and let's do a little bit of Cycles 4D rendering. So here I prepared our first scene. Let's open our typical car client scene, and your client wants to have a wireframe for your car. And let's see how we find Cycles 4D. We have Cycles 4D in our top menu over here. We have some objects you can create, and for example the Cycles 4D camera and light with some properties. So let's just create light over here. Let's put it over there. And then we have one of the best features, the real-time preview. Let's open the real-time preview. And here you can change the device from CPU to GPU, and you can directly change that. And this is very awesome to work with. If you have a client sitting next to you, you can just sit there and talk with him and move the lights and discuss how you want to change it. And you can do everything in real time. Change the colors and see the final, already quite the final rendered image in your live preview. All right, so let's change to a different view. I've customized my layout to have this dual view over here, so I can directly work with that. And now let's go into our next feature, the heart of Cycles 4D, the material node system. That is absolutely unique, and you will see why. To create a Cycles 4D material, let's go to our material options and add an object material. For now, I just drag that out, and so I can quickly add all the materials later on. And now we want to simply create some light materials for those meshes over here. So let's just drag the material onto the meshes. All right. And here is our node editor. And the node editor you can move around as you are used to in Cinema 4D viewport as well. Just move around. And when you right click, you have a lot of options for your nodes. You have like input nodes, shader nodes, and you can just select them. And for example, now we want to have an emission on our geometry, and let's just delete this one over here. And when you want to use this emission, just drag it into the surface output. All right. And now you directly see our car render is getting light from those created lights over here. And the very unique thing is you see everything on the nodes. You can change the colors here. You can increase the strength. You can use the sliders. So if you build a big node system, you can follow the path of how the material works in here. And now we want to create this very cool looking wireframe shader. And this shader is a mix of glass shader and the wireframe. And to do that, we are going to create a material for our car. And let's drag it just on top of our car. All right. Let's kill this. And let's start with an emission again. Drag that into the surface. All right, and now our car is glowing. Let's leave out the floor. And we want to create a glass material. And you can create everything within this material. And now we want to create a mix material. Let's go to shaders, add a mix shader. And the mix shader, you can put your materials in there. And the mix shader has a factor. And the factor is actually a value between 0 and 1. And the factor is very special. You can either put input textures that are coming from Cycles 4D, Cinema 4D textures like noises as well, or other image maps to separate your materials. You can mix your materials with specific texture, and everything that is colored, for example, is going to be converted within Cycles 4D into a gradient between 0 and 1. And the other thing are other inputs. For example, have input nodes from Cycles 4D we will see later the Fresnel node. Then you can use object attributes like the speed or the radius of things, the particles. And actually if you have all kinds of attributes from objects you can imagine can be used as a factor. And it has a port to Espresso as well. But sometimes you have values that are larger than 0 to 1. And you have to bring them down to 1. Like if something is moving faster than 1, for example 100 centimeter, just a very little math is required, just a very little to match that. All right, let's go back to our scene. We can now add our wireframe node. Cycles 4D has a wireframe node, and here we have the factor that is producing values between 0 and 1, and we can drag that into the mix shader. And now we see that the wireframe node is mixing our two materials, and we can check that to have the pixel size. And our wireframe node is mixing now the two materials with each other, and you have already a pretty cool wireframe mix between glass and emission. And you can do everything within this material. You don't need to do that in compositing. You can directly work with your client on this one. And now we want to add some colors to our wireframe. And to do that, I'm going to use, let's go to the emission only. Let's introduce a Fresnel node. And the Fresnel node is creating a gradient. The more angle of the camera view towards the mesh, the lighter it gets, and you can adjust the Fresnel over here, like changing a little bit of the values. And now we want to give that a color. And to give that a color, I will introduce you the most powerful tool in Cycles 4D. It's the color ramp. And that is actually one of my absolutely loved tools. The color ramp node has a factor that's getting values from 0 to 1, that it's according like black to white. And as you can see here, it's remapping the values to a color gradient that you are going to set. And here are some examples. On the left side, you have a grayscale texture. And here I have the color ramp, the actual color ramp that is mapping the colors to this grayscale texture. So the blue colors are more in these darker areas, and the brighter it gets, the more colors from the orange palette is getting on this object. Here is another example where I have a plastic material and a volume inside the plastic material, and here I have a noise, and I want to use this noise to separate these two materials and to clamp them. And the color ramp on this noise is able to clamp the values, so you get this really nice shaped volume cutouts. And for motion design, it's even more important. As you can see here, this is working during time and space. So if you have an object that is changing its colors from black to white, you can use a color ramp in your material system to map those colors onto your objects. This is going to be very important for Mograph and for X particles as well. This is pretty useful. All right. So you have your mix shader, and now we want to just add on the right click a converter, and there we have our super tool, the color ramp. And Cycles 4D node system has this auto snap that is pretty cool. That's very useful. You can just snap it in there, and now you should be able to recolor your Fresnel. So just start with a darker color over here. Let's take something like a dark blue. Then we go into it's going off here, a lighter blue. And you see it's changing directly. You can choose everything you want. It's very intuitive. You can really work like an artist. All right. Then we're going into orange color. Then let's go into a green, for example, like this brighter green. And then let's go into blue again. All right, that's a pretty cool one. All right, and now you see that's already depending on the angle of the car. And as we are going to use a glass material, you can see through, and everything that inside the car gets this Fresnel shader as well. And now let's see what happens when we go and mix all of that together. And there we go. You have now a very nice wireframe material that is looking through the car depending on your Fresnel. Let's, for example, like these values are pretty cool. And then you go into your pretty nice material and you can adjust everything like you want. For example, let's increase the emission to have a more intense wireframe. And now we have a floor. Just duplicate our material and let's drag the material onto our floor. And maybe you don't want to have those orange colors over here. Just go to the ramp and kick out. Maybe just leave the green. That's pretty cool already. And that's actually how you can build this very nice material. And it's all within one material. That's the awesome part. You don't need to do that in compositing to render wireframe. You don't need to change the colors there and render again. You can just do it on the fly in the node system. The next part is maybe you want to add some HDRI. You know that from other tools. And to do that, let's just create an environment. Let's go into environment material. And here you have the background. You can change the color. All right. And now let's just add environment texture. All right. And here you can put in any kind of, here's a pretty nice one. And you see it's directly working in the scene. And if you're ready with building a material, I highly recommend to use the Cinema 4D content browser, which is really awesome with Cycles 4D materials. For example, here I have a pretty nice list of things. I might just quickly add a preset for here. Just go and add a new preset library. Let's call it webinar. Right. And now you can just you can drag in your materials, or you can drag in complete objects. So you can just drag in the environment later on as well. Again, if you use it on another place, that's a really fast way to use it, and I use it a lot. All right, and now we want to maybe add some pretty nice depth of field over here. To do that, we can just add a camera. Let's go into the camera, and here we have the camera tag. And as you know it from Cinema 4D Core, just pick the focus distance where you want. And here you have this aperture size, and increase that to have a very nice looking depth of field. It's pretty amazing looking already. And let's decrease it a little bit. And before we close this first part, here you can make the roughness larger. And then you have this very nice looking retro look of your car, depending on the colors, and it's taking the colors of the Fresnel, and it's a pretty nice one. All right, let's go. This was the first part, and now let's go and create some Mograph. First of all, I will show you how we are going to create this very nice slice typography. And as you can see, we are mixing missive material and glass materials again, and we are actually using the Mograph colors. So let's go into our scene. Let's just close this one and open the scene over here. And here you can see that I just switched the view. All right, and here I have a Mograph sim, and here you see the slice typography is getting randomized with some random effectors. And let's quickly see how I built this. And let's go into create a new scene, and let's go and add a mo text. Let's change that to ABC and select a more cool font. I like this one over here. And now, one of the best features, the Voronoi fracture tool. Let's drag in the mo text into the Voronoi fracture, and here you have your fractures. Let's go to the sources, kill the source, and now we want to slice them by using a plane. Rotate the plane from 90 degrees. Move it over here, and let's display the lines. And we decrease the segments a bit, for example, like 4 and 5. And now we are going to use that as a source. All right. And here you have your typography sliced already. And let's make the text a little bit more thin. And let's just unhide this one, and let's hit Alt G to group that, copy that, and let's move it a little bit back. And now we can just simply take the plane and change the slicing a little bit to have a more random look. And now when you select both Voronoi fractures, you can add a Mograph effector. All right, and it's looking pretty awesome already. But maybe you don't want to have everything separate parts. You want to have good looking slices. So let's go to the mo text, caps, and create single object. All right, now they don't have the segments exploded. You can go to the random modifier and just have the randomness in the Z. All right, so this is how I built the slice text basically, and now we want to create a cool shader for that using these colors over here. All right, so let's go to our scene. I will change the view now, and the first thing we do is the same as we did last time. Let's go and create a Cinema Cycles 4D object material, and you see that we have a hierarchy over here. Just put the material on top of everything, and let's create an emission shader, delete that, and put it into here. All right, there we have our type. And now I want to introduce you to the attribute node. The attribute node is very powerful tool as well, and it is able to read all the color information, and also it can read selections and vertex maps and bring that into the material editor as well. So this is actually a very nice node, and we're going to see how it works. So now we have the emission over here. Let's add then input attribute node. Let's put let's connect the colors. Now you see it's not working. We just need to change that to object color. All right, and there we go. You directly have all the colors from Mograph inside your material system, and you can work with them. So now I want to create an emission mix between glass and other stuff. So let's just quickly add a mix shader like we did before. A mix shader. Then let's add a diffusion. That's the diffuse. That's a simple material. It's pretty much like the standard material from Cinema 4D. And let's drag the emission in there, the diffuse. And now we have some kind of a mixed material. And now I want to separate them using the colors. So let's create our super tool, the color ramp again. Let's put the color into the color to feed the vector. And now we put that into our mix shader. And with this color ramp, we can now clamp and actually we can decide which range of colors are going to be used from our Mograph. So we can just say, okay, I want to have more the colors from the brighter colors over here that are they are located more over here, brighter colors, or more like the bluish colors. And this is actually a pretty nice way to create a very nice look on the fly. And we can increase the strength over here. And the cool thing about Cycles 4D, you can stack your materials unlimitless. So you can add another mix shader. Then we want to mix that with the glass material. So let's add a glass material. Let's add this into the shader. Connect the mix shader with the next mix shader. And we want to use a Fresnel again. So depending on the angle of the camera lens to the surface. And now we should mix the glass with our diffuse and with our emission material, depending on the Fresnel. And the more I increase the Fresnel now, the more glass shines through. And we can add a little bit of roughness over here, like 2.2. And we can now, as I saved the preset over here, let's just add an HDRI. All right, over here, and we can rotate the HDRI. To make it really looking from behind or something. All right. And for glass, I recommend to increase the max ray bounces in the render settings. And I want to just quickly go through the render settings if you like. So here you have the device. You can change that for later on for rendering. You can select all the devices we have in our real-time preview as well. Then in the performance settings, you have some tile size rendering, but the presets are already pretty good for rendering, so no need to change that. And here you have, the very important is your final samples. This is according to the samples we have over here. And then we have the subdivisions for displacements. And here you have very detailed, in-depth options to change your bounces. And now we want to have more bounces for the glass. So, and the cool thing is, you can now go and remap the color values like we did before in a very cool way. If your client tells you, I don't want this color palette, I just want to have some different colors, just drag in your color ramp and you can select the nice presets from Cinema 4D and just play around with your style as you like. It's up to you what you want to do, and it's really awesome to work with. All right, so this is the attribute color, and you can do a ton of stuff. You can imagine how many possibilities you have with such a node. All right, let's go into the next example. Another Mograph typical thing. You have this honeycomb, and here you have typical Mograph scene where we are controlling our motion with audio, and the more they come out, the more orange they get. And as they are all instances, you can apply a different node, and that's the very nice object info node. And the object info node has some inputs that are producing, for example, this in the background are cloners colored by the position. When they are more on the left, it's getting green, or in Z space, they're getting more red. And also you have a random factor, so you can color your Mograph clones randomly as well. So let's see how that works. Let's open the scene. All right, and here I have my honeycomb scene. And let's just like we did before, let's create a material. Let's go object material. All right, and put that onto let's put that onto the caps. That's great. And let's add an emission node. All right, and let's see, it's working in real time again. If the viewport is a little bit sluggish, you can just hide it from the cloners from the viewport, and you see it's still working in Cycles 4D. It's pretty fast. All right, and now we want to add our object node, object info. And when you drag in the random node, you can see that it's directly giving each object a random color. Or you can drag the position into the emission. And now you see that it's depending on the scene, where the scene starts, it's coloring your objects. And now we want to create a depth effect. So the more they come out, the more color they get. Therefore, let's add a little bit of math. All right. So let's go and let's add a converter, separate X, Y, Z. Let's drag that into our position. And we only want to have the Z. All right. So now the more depth, the deeper they are, the brighter they get. And we want to add a math node, math, and let's multiply that with a very low value. So we're bringing down these position values to a factor between 1 and 0. All right. Now you see it's getting darker. When I increase that value over here, you see it's getting brighter. So you actually see that it's depending on the position within 3D space. All right, let's change the value to this one. And let's add our super tool, the color ramp. And now you can create our ramp as we did before. Let's add a little bit of color over here. Blue one. And the more we go out, let's go into the orange color. And you directly see when you change the ramp, you see that it's working already. And we go into like a little bit more yellowish. And then let's go into very, very bright. And we can increase the strength over here. All right, that's our material. Looking for the depth of your clones, and it's coloring your the clones depending on the depth. All right. So now we can just add some more materials into the scene, like create a glossy material, a reflective one. Just delete this one, add a shader glossy into the surface, and let's drag that onto the body so we have a nice reflection. Can do a little bit of roughness over here. All right, and we want to add a material for the splines as well. So let's just I like the color ramp we did, so we can just copy the color ramp over here, copy that, and we have direct spline support. Just add a Cycles 4D curve tag. Let's create a material, an object material. Here we want to have emission as well. You see, I like the emission a lot. Let's paste our ramp. And for splines, Cycles 4D has its own hair info node. And the intercept is actually the length of the spline, and it's creating a factor as well between 0 and 1 from the start to the end. And now we need to add that to our Mograph clone. And let's quickly deactivate the other stuff. And now we have our splines over here, and we can just choose a different color like this, and you see they are getting the colors as well. All right, and we can apply our clone to, I have some dust particles over here, just add the material on there, and they are getting the color as well. Then I have camera set up with some depth of field, and our motion graphics honeycomb cloner on sound are now ready. All right, and as you know it, you can just change on the fly the colors as you wish and try everything out you want. It's awesome, and you see how fast it works. All right, and now I want to go to my favorite topic, X particles. And as you know, INSYDIUM is the creator of X particles and the creator of Cycles 4D. You can assume that it's probably the best bridge between those plugins you can imagine, and INSYDIUM did a very well job on it. So let's go and check out what we are going to do. And the first example I brought is this trails, and you see that the trails are changing their colors. All right, and therefore let's go into the scene. Let's close everything, and here I have the scene, and when I play it, let's change the view again so we see what's happening over here. So if you want to build the scene, I quickly just deselect the cache. So I created some particles. Then I added the XP rotator over here with a fall off. So the particles that are inside are rotating faster than outside. So it's like a gravitational rotation. And then I use the XP turbulence, and the XP turbulence has a mapping. So the faster the particles are, the more turbulence affects them. And in the end, I added some particle colors depending on their speed. So the faster they are, the brighter they get. And this is what we are going to use in Cycles 4D as well. And in the end, I added some trails, and I cached everything. So this is very nice to work with. All right, this is our scene to begin with. Let's get back to our double view. All right, Let's add a Cycles 4D material and drag that onto our trails. And as you know that, let's add an emission node. Drag that to the surface. And you directly see the trails are seen by Cycles 4D. And we are doing this in real time now. And we want to change a little bit of the shape of the trails. Let's add a Cycles 4D curve tag. And in the curve tag you have the start and end, like you know it from here. Just select the start to 0, the end to 0.5 or something to have a very nice looking trails. All right, and it's working pretty well. And now I may introduce the next powerful tool, the attribute node. But it's again the attribute node. You know that already from the beginning. It also contains all this X particles generator, like the XP skinner colors, the trail colors. Then we have the wet map support and the XP generator. And the attribute node is already built to read those attributes. It's all within this node. So let's go back and let's add an input attribute node. Put in the colors into the emission and let's change the mode to use trails. All right, and we directly have our particle colors projected on our trail colors. That is pretty awesome. All right, and now we want to just add some colors with it. So the faster they are, the brighter they get. Let's add our color ramp, put that in between, and the slow particles are blue. Then let's change a little bit different. Let's take this one. I like this one more. Then let's go into dark blue over here. And then the faster we go, let's choose, for example, like this orange color. And then let's go into a yellowish one and a little bit more yellow. All right. And this is absolutely unique. You can't do that with any other renderer except the standard renderer in Cinema 4D with X particles. You can do that as well. But here you have it in unbiased rendering. And let's just quickly add the camera. I have the camera over here with some depth of field. And you see that's looking pretty awesome. All right. And now we want to colorize particles. And now I want to introduce to you the particle info node. And this is probably one of the most powerful nodes, and you see how large it is. It's actually over the headline here. And you have values like index, age, lifespan, position, the radius of the particles, etc. And to demonstrate how powerful it is, let's try and create this scene over here. All right. And this scene, let's go back to Cinema 4D. And let's open the scene. I switch again my view. And in this scene I have an emitter that is moving with some keyframes, and it's the emission is connected to the velocity of my object. So the faster it is, the more particles are getting created. You can do that with a little bit of espresso here. Then the particles are getting color from the speed within the scene. And then I added the XP domain. And the XP domain loves very thin emitters. When you have a very thin emitter, you see that our flip forces are doing a very well job on those particles. And then you have this very nice looking fluid simulation. And now we want to color them. So let's back to our double side view. All right. And let's add a material. And first of all, let's add a Cycles4D X particles tag. It has its own tag for X particles, of course. Let's add that, and you directly see that the particles are live, and it's actually creating instances, little spheres for each particle. So you can have some options over here, the particle sphere segments. So if you have millions of particles, you actually don't want to have so many segments over here. You can just decrease that to have much more speed. So if you go to 3, you have triangles. Let's just take like 11 or something to still have them. All right. And now let's drag our material onto the emitter. All right. And then we want to go into the material. We have a diffuse over here. And let's add our input particle info node. And you see it's a very large node, and you don't need all of that. So let's just select the color over here, drag that into diffuse, and you directly see that we have the colors, the black colors are getting black and white, and you can actually right click on your node and hide the unused sockets. All right, and now the node is smaller and it's much more easy to use it. And now we want, as we did before, let's do a little bit recoloring again. Color ramp, and you know my colors already. Going from blue to orange. And then let's go into the green this time. Somewhere over here. And let's make the colors a little bit more natural. Let's just pick them in between and delete those ones. So you're getting a little bit more natural looking colors. All right. And now I want to have some glowy particles within them. To make that, let's add a mix shader again. All right. And let's put in our diffuse. Then let's create an emission node. Let's put it over here. And then let's drag that into a surface. And now the particles are getting this light emission node, the colors. And we want to have the colors in the emission as well. And now we want to create a material, a color ramp for the factor again. Let's go to create and add a color ramp. Let's put the colors of our particles into the factor and put that ramp into the mix. And now you see that we can adjust the ramp where our particles should be bright. And this is how you select ranges within your particles in time, depending on their speed. And now you can create particles over here, light them up over there, somewhere over here. Now let's create a third one. All right. That's pretty nice. All right. Let's increase our emissions so they are even more bright. And now if you play that, you will see this one is a little bit too bright again. You see that the particles are only brightened up in those certain ranges, and this is a really unique. You can actually do with the Cycles material more than you can do with the X particles material in core. So for a lot of purpose, you can imagine how many stuff you can do with that, and it's really awesome to work with. All right. And the last thing I want to show you today is that you can actually use different kind of objects over here. And let's change. I don't like that color so much. Let's go into blue again. And this is the Cycles4D tag has an option to use objects as well. So here in the background you see particles that are using a custom instance geometry narrow. And let's quickly add that to our scene as well. So let's go and create a cube. And let's put the cube, just drag it inside our object. All right. And now we just need to decrease the scale a bit, the size. All right, and you see that that's already, let's put this cube aside. So all the cubes are getting the colors. And you see that we are going, that it's like similar to Mograph, we are creating instances. And right now the cubes are looking all in the same direction. So let's go to the XP emitter. Let's add to use rotation, and we want to have a tangential rotation. So when I simulate that, our cubes are looking into the direction of the particles, and you see how fast it works. This is pretty amazing. All right, now we have created some instances, and you can still change the size of the cubes, like even smaller. And Cycles4D is able to project the particle colors onto our instances. And to do that, you just have to drag your material onto your source object. And there we go. Now we have all the attributes we created in our material on our cubes. Good. I think. So thank you.
You've covered quite a lot.
Yes.
Thanks again for attending.